This morning, I will be talking about resilience, which is often thought to mean bouncing back to the original shape. Well, it does mean that in physics. For humans and their institutions, including churches, it means a little more. It is the strength needed to move forward in the face of opposition and obstacles. Perhaps it can be illustrated by a story you all remember from childhood. Yes, another childhood story. The little engine who could. Now, I've discovered some details that were left out of the story. All right, I've made up some details that were not part of the original story. As you recall, a train found itself stranded while going up a steep hill. Its engine failed, and numerous large, strong engines were asked to step in, and they all declined for various reasons. However, a little pilot engine insisted on trying. The little engine tried and tried again and again and failed again and again. Always it tried, again uttering its famous line, "I think I can." Well, what's left out of this is that the other engines hung around and mocked or discouraged the little engine. They gave the little engine warnings like, "You're going to blow out your boiler. You're not powerful enough for this job. Your couplings won't hold." Of course, in the end, the little engine could. And the biggest and most powerful of the other engines exclaimed in wonder, "She was warned, yet she persisted." This is resilience at work. Some of you may also recall that some years ago, Connie Keller altered this famous phrase to give us the UUFP, the little church that could and did. Resilience is a necessary trait for overcoming and succeeding. And I would like to see us build on Connie's phrase and become known as the once little church that could and did and will. Now, do you really need to hear the rest of the sermon? I admit when I first agreed to do this sermon, I thought that this month's theme was resilience. I subsequently learned that it is in fact resistance. So should I scrap my research? I hadn't done a whole lot, but I liked what I'd found. And I liked it a lot, actually. So should I just ignore the theme and go ahead with resilience? Well, on reflection, I realized that the two were not unconnected. I also recalled the conversation between myself, Judy Remsburg, and Buffy Boak. We were on the way back from some event at Richmond, the Unitarian Church of Richmond, and we were discussing whether or not there was a theme that ran through the sermons of a given speaker. We just heard David Hicks McPherson speak. I said, I was not sure that I could name such a theme in my own presentations. And Judy replied, "Yes, there is. Most of yours deal with connections." So I plowed ahead connecting the two words. I've concluded that they are two different things, but that resilience is necessary for any successful resistance. To resist, there needs to be a push, something that exerts pressure and calls for a response. However, before acting against the push, there has to be a bounce back. I was quite surprised when I did some research on resilience by how much literature there was on the subject. Psychology even has a resilience theory category of study. There are websites dealing with the characteristics of resilient people and organizations, websites on how to improve the resiliency of your company, and articles on how individuals can learn resiliency and organizations can train their staffs in resiliency. So how is resiliency then defined? Merriam-Webster tells us that scientifically, it's the ability of an object to return to the original size and shape after being compressed. It also defines it as the ability to recover from or adjust easily to adversity or change. I'm not too sure I agree with easily. The Oxford Languages definition on the web is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, toughness, and as a second meaning, the ability of a substance to spring back into shape, elasticity. But note the words recover and toughness. The American Psychological Association also offers us a definition, the process and the outcome of successfully adapting to difficult or challenging life experiences, especially through mental, emotional, and behavioral flexibility and adjustment to external and internal demands. And then the APA identifies factors that contribute to resilience. And I much prefer their definition of successfully adapting to easily adapting. First, they note the ways in which individuals view and engage the world as a factor in resilience. Second, the availability of quality social resources. And thirdly, specific coping strategies. Again, keep these in mind as we explore resilience a little further. They suggest that resilience in humans and human institutions grows out of their worldview and their connections. It also suggests that resilience can both be learned and strengthened. So what makes for a resilient organism? Jeremy Sutton, in an article entitled Survive and Thrive, tells us that after an adverse event, resilient people can sometimes become aware of unexpected abilities as they respond to the challenge. He quotes this definition of resiliency from C. Pemberton's Resiliency, a Practical Guide for Coaches. And yes, resiliency is also a major theme in sports training. The capacity to remain flexible in our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors when faced by life disruptions or extended periods of pressure, so we emerge from difficulty stronger, wiser, and more able. Rob Cross, Donna Greenberg, and Karen Dillon, writing in the Harvard Business Review, give guidance to business leaders hoping to build resilience into their organization. Employees should learn to make sense of others in a given situation, be encouraged in the confidence to push back and to self-advocate. It is important that they see a path forward and keep in mind the organization's purpose. Support should be given for the release of negative emotions and to help employees be able to laugh at themselves and the situation. The Summit Counseling Center then offers 7 C's approach to resiliency. These are connection, conviction, caution, creativity, compassion, commitment, and character. And Ken Ginsberg, another researcher, offers the 7 C's of resiliency for adolescents: competence, confidence, connection, character, contribution, coping, and control. Arit Snood, the director of the Global Center for Resiliency, adds 5 principles. See if any of these sound familiar: gratitude, compassion, acceptance, meaning, and forgiveness. So resiliency can be an attitude toward life, a feeling that despite dangers and challenges, one goes on, one persists. It may be inborn in one's DNA. It may also be learned through experience, as Humpty Dumpty did. By practicing the 5 principles and cultivating the 7 C's, one can develop and strengthen resiliency. But resiliency does not protect one from experiencing and being affected by negative events. These are part of life. Resiliency is the ability to continue forward and even learn from the pitfalls of life. It is a form of strength. It might be good here to pause and name some people who are exemplars of resiliency. It will be a diverse group, but all shared the ability to bounce back and to go on to achieve after adversity. We can start at this time of year with the disciples of Jesus of Nazareth. They suffered the painful and humiliating death of their leader, but rallied and continued his movement. Next, I would raise up the names of several of our outstanding Unitarian Universalist mothers: Clara Barton, Florence Nightingale, Olympia Brown, Dorothea Dix, and Susan B. Anthony, among others. Both Presidents Roosevelt exhibited strong resiliency. Muhammad Ali and Helen Keller showed us how to live resilient lives. Martin Luther King, Gabby Giffords, James and Susan Brady, John Lewis, all supremely resilient people. The students of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, and far too many other young survivors of gun violence, and the Tennessee Three, all offer recent poignant examples. There are many, many more I could mention. President Zelensky springs to mind, but time is limited, and I hope that you are mentally compiling your own lists. One way of building your own resiliency is to be inspired by seeing it in others. So can the UUFP as an organization and its members be added to the list? Are we resilient people, and are we building a resilient organization? Can we develop more resilience as we face an uncertain future? Again, resilience is a necessary building block if we are to function as a force for good. It allows us to face the challenges not only of resisting evil, but of advocating for good. So we can take a look at our DNA, which I will take for the purpose of this homily as the mission statement, the congregational covenant, and the 7 principles. Whatever may come out of the Article 2 process, and that should be exciting, the 7 principles are certainly well baked into our vision of both the UUA and the UUFP. So do the mission, covenant, and principles set us up to be resilient, both as people and as the UUFP? Well, let's start by taking a look at the 7 principles. They are not part of a covenant among the members of this congregation, but between the congregation itself as a corporate body and the other member congregations of the UUA. And right here, we have an important basis for resiliency. Resilient people and groups reach out and form supportive relationships with others. So the UUFP can reach out to other congregations and also support other congregations. Knowing this contributes to our resiliency. Being part of a larger group helps with confidence and calls us to honor commitment, both of which are part of resiliency. If we look at the principles themselves, they help support resiliency in the UUA and the member congregations. The inherent worth and dignity of every person certainly supports what Kendra Cherry cites as the strong internal sense of control and self-compassion. The principle arose as a reaction to the view prevalent in theology that human value, as far as it might exist, existed only as something derived from God. Such a view cannot sustain real resiliency, since it undermines any sense of personal control and self-compassion, as it also denies self-worth. And then we have a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience, and the use of the democratic practice within our congregations and society at large, which affirm our allegiance to the essential trust that we can deal with situations and challenges. They also provide us with a base of competence by naming the values that guide our interactions. Again, this is a good place to restate that developing resiliency doesn't mean you avoid problems or that you will emerge unscathed from them. It provides the confidence that you can address and learn from them. Justice, equity, and compassion in human relations goes right to the need for compassion and reinforces the role of connection and commitment. And acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations, again, helps us develop confidence and to call forth our contributions. The right of conscience and the use of democratic process and the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, and respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are part, all address the need to remind us of the greater purpose we serve together. They also help us when we need to find a way forward during challenging times. By now, you're seeing that each principle performs the job of building resiliency into the approach to the world taken by the UUA and the member congregations, including the UUFP. Turning now to our congregational documents, we can see that resiliency is baked into the UUFP. Our mission statement certainly sets us on a resilient path. Grow in wonder. Resilient people and organizations need to have an open approach to life, an ability to grow that helps them find solutions or accept new realities, and to always, always be learning. By having a growth-oriented approach, we can feel that we have control. We can have a belief in our abilities and our actions to play a part in determining outcomes. Wonder itself points to a positive relation to our world, seeking relationship with everything and valuing the universe in a positive way. Connect in love. Again, connection is one of the pillars of resiliency. The ability to empathize with others and to build strong relationships. To emphasize love points again to the positive approach to life. When we connect with love, we do not deny any of the negative impacts others may experience. Instead, we identify with their pain and seek to alleviate it. Love directs us to problem solving, another aspect of the resilient being. And then engage in service. Well, this fits right into developing and maintaining resiliency in a person or a congregation in several ways. Obviously, to engage in service requires establishing connections. It also encourages a positive outlook, a belief that you can make a difference by your actions. The Mayo Clinic has a list of tips for developing resiliency, and high on that list is do things that give you a sense of accomplishment and purpose. Set goals. To engage in effective service, it is often necessary to reach out to other groups or to offer them our support. So many forms of service will engage us on a very emotional level. And another characteristic of resilience is exercising effective emotional regulation, which also points to learn from the past. Finally, inspire generosity. The generous person or church is focused on supporting others, in finding solutions, and on focusing on the future, and effectively dealing with negative events or situations by recognizing and working through them. Excuse me. Most recently, we have become a truly covenanted body by adopting a formal covenant. This covenant deals with relationships within our congregation and between the congregation and the world. By offering each other our support in love, we will strengthen our resiliency, both for each member and for the congregation. The covenant sets forth purposes for us: protecting the earth, building racial, social, and environmental justice, and using our gifts to enrich the mission. It encourages us to model our UU values in the world and gives us methods for interacting within the congregation. Overall, the covenant will truly help the UUFP to maintain itself as a resilient organization and support each member's resiliency. So we can conclude that yes, indeed, the UUFP is a resilient organization made up of resilient people. Our recent history makes this very clear. We have faced internal and external challenges. There have been vigorous debates and disagreements among members over the way forward. But the structure that we created for our congregation gave us ways to deal with these challenges and go forward together. The greatest challenge to our resiliency may have arrived with the modern equivalent of the plague. It arrived, as believe me, I am very much aware, right after we made the momentous decision to look for a new home. The board acted to keep operations and services going as well as possible during the emergency and to put in place plans to respond as conditions changed. And fortunately, Zoom was available and we embraced its use. And we continued and we went forward. Now, it would be easy to abandon some of our goals and ideas, particularly the idea of finding a new home during the pandemic as we saw attendance drop off and not much use being made of the buildings. But we remain true to the idea that we have a role to play for the good in this world and that we build not for the present, but for the future. Our future orientation is an important part of our resiliency. And even now we are continuing to prepare for that future with the incorporation of the congregation and the upcoming revisions of the bylaws. One more aspect of the resilient organization is that they plan and they take responsibility. It is part of that sense of control that reassures us that we can go forward. It's a very good thing for each of us to know that we are part of a caring and supportive community, that we have a home base, so to speak, where we can come, rest, and recharge. It works both ways. It helps us to stay resilient knowing that others may need our help. Mutual assistance and care are very much a basis for resiliency. Far more important is that this resiliency creates a basis for our strength. In the future, as in the present, we are and will be called upon to support movements that establish a more just, beloved community and to resist threats to that community. Some of these challenges are now known, some have yet to emerge. Because of the resiliency of the beloved community, which we have established here, we have the strength, both as individuals and as a congregation, that we will need. To borrow from one of Reverend Andrew's recent sermons, maintaining and developing our sets of resiliency will help us to stay woke and thus enable us to survive and thrive as a moral force in the world. And now I have some wondering questions for you. I wonder if you have had to respond to a situation by drawing on your resilience before being able to respond. I wonder how resilience helped you to get through the pandemic. And I wonder if you would agree with me that the more you draw on your resilience, the more resiliency you will build up.